Monster Hunter is a very unique and fun franchise, and even compared to one another, the games are pretty unique. And that's what this video is about. I am going to talk about and compare certain aspects of Monster Hunter World, Rise, and Wild, as these are the Monster Hunter games I've put the most time into, and I believe these are the 3 most recent main games that have come out. Probably. I don't know, I'm kind of dumb. Now to start off, I like all 3 games. I'm going to compare them and talk about things I like from one game more than the others, and things I dislike compared to one another. But overall, this is very subjective, and this is my personal opinion. I like all 3 of the games for what they do on their own, and I'm just going to focus on the games themselves. I won't be talking about things surrounding the games like Wild's performance issues, for example. The point of this video is to just talk about the game itself. The things I'm going to be talking about will be split into 3 major aspects: combat and weapons, world design and story, monsters and difficulty. And with that, we are going to start with I think the general combat of every game is good, but they are good in different ways. To me, Wilds has the smoothest feeling combat, World has the most impactful, and Rise has the fastest. To go into more detail, Wilds found a balance of speed and weight, with weapons having a satisfying sense of weight to each hit, but none of the weapons feeling too slow or clunky. And the use of focus mode really adds an ease of use to each of the weapons, as focus mode gives you the ability to aim where you're striking in the middle of attacking. I have seen some people complain that this reduces a type of difficulty that comes from having to aim your weapons and commit to where you strike. I get this argument because you would have to be more careful as into when and where you attack, not being able to go back on yourself in case you missed. But I do think the pros do outweigh the cons for me, as having more control over your character will always feel better to me, and that's what focus mode provides. It just makes the game feel so much better in a way that the other games don't. I feel I should also add, I do think that Focus Strike is a fun mechanic, but I think it lacks overall depth. It just simply feels like another way to deal a burst of damage with very little risk. They tried to alleviate this by having Guardians heal their wounds over time, but because you can just hit the wounds at any point in time without really having to worry about major repercussions, as soon as you see the wounds on a Guardian, you can hit them without having to worry about it, so there's no point in worrying about them healing their wounds because you can hit them before they have the chance to do that, alleviating the mechanic for me at least. I'm not saying that it needs to be a highly dangerous maneuver, but I feel like right now, there isn't much to it outside of weapons that give buffs from using Focus Strike like the Charge Blade for example, or min-maxing when you hit the wounds in order to have the most knockdowns on a monster. Again, this isn't me saying it's bad, I just hope that they add a little more depth in the future somehow, like perhaps making a more long-term mechanic to hitting a wound, perhaps like a monster gets more enraged or moves faster the more wounds you hit on it, or something like that. Overall, the weapon feel is great, and the way each weapon handles is great. I'm no Wilds expert, and I'm mediocre on a good day with my favorite weapon, the Charge Blade. But I have used every weapon at least a few times, and I do like each weapon. The Gun Lance combos, the new Charge Blade powering systems, the Dual Blade's perfect dodge, all of the additions that they added to the weapons that I don't believe were in previous games makes all of the weapons feel so good to use in Wilds. And while Wilds feels smooth, I will admit it does lack the same type of weight and impact that World has. World's combat has an undeniable sense of weight to it and its weapons, making each hit on a monster feel so satisfying. Every slice, every slam, every stab of a weapon feels so good to hit, but I will admit, the trade-off for this sense of weight is the speed and ease of use that each weapon can lack at times. It feels good to hit stuff, but it feels really bad to miss something, and it's very easy to miss something in World. At least for me, I don't know, I'm bad at the game. The game just feels slower to some, maybe even clunky, as the general slowness of the weapons can make them feel unwieldy. But I do think this is another situation in which the pros do outweigh the cons, as if you can get used to the speed of the weapons, then the combat can feel really good. And I admit, while it is unfair to bring up Iceborne, as Wild has yet to get its DLC at the time of me recording this, I do want to bring up the Clutch Claw, because this adds a notable amount of depth to each of the weapons weapons, and just even the clutch claw attack itself adds a layer of depth to the game, as deciding when and where you do the clutch claw attack really matters because it is a risky maneuver, as it takes a good chunk of time to pull it off, and it's very easy for a monster to damage you while you're doing it if you're not careful. But if you are able to pull it off, then it adds a good chunk of damage to your attacks, and for some fights it's borderline necessary to actually pull it off. And as I said before, it added a layer of depth to each of the weapons, like for example skipping to TCS with the greatsword, or adding more damage to the bow's projectiles, and even the wyvern stake for the gun lance. All of these were great additions in my opinion that even if they weren't good for the weapons, they still added an extra fun factor to the game that I don't think should be ignored. But for the other side of the spectrum is Monster Hunter Rise, and having what feels like the fastest combat to me. I don't think it's the most satisfying compared to the two, but I think it still feels good, and the speed made it a little bit easier to get into the game for me compared to the other two. And I believe what adds to this sense of speed is definitely the wire bugs. I love the wire bugs. And I think they are a fun mechanic that adds to Rise's personality, and as an added bonus, you have more moves to unlock, which adds an extra layer of progression to the game for me, like for example, getting the blast dash for the gun lance, or honestly most of the moves for longsword are really fun, and even being able to switch out attacks entirely is really fun. I like the wire bug attacks, but I also enjoy the wire bug mechanic overall. I think having it as a limited resource that has multiple uses makes it more nuanced when it comes to using it. I think the wyvern riding is fun and is kind of goofy, but I really like it and I think it's unique. And I like the fact that the wire bugs are used for both movement and attacking, as they all pull from the same resource. So it makes you think more about what you're going to do before you do it, as the weight of your actions has more consequence, as if you use one thing too much, then you won't be able to use it for another. Like using too much movement, you won't be able to attack as often. There's more nuance to it and I like that. Granted, this probably isn't that important when you get to endgame stuff, as you can very likely put together builds or armor that makes it so that you get wire bugs really fast, or you get like 5 by default or something. But overall, I think as a mechanic, it is very fun. I don't like Rise the most between the three, but I do think it is noteworthy and is still fun on its own. Rise has speed, World has weight, and Wilds has a satisfying mix of both. But with this, we move on to the next section, World. Now, I admit this entire video is subjective, but I feel this section might be the most subjective, as a lot of what makes me like certain environments over other parts will be what I like visually. Each game has its own sense of style, and I think it's nailed in each game. But I think in terms of art design, World is my favorite. It's going to be hard to get into the details, but I will start by talking about the Ancient Forest, as I love the Ancient Forest. It feels like it's almost a whimsical forest. Granted, that could just be because of the big tree in the middle, but almost every location and world has such a unique idea. I like that the Rotten Vale is just like the world's organic dumpster. I like the Coral Valley being an underwater habitat that's above the ground, or the Elder Recess being the Elder Recess. I love all of these places, and going through them is always a treat for me. The world design of World is incredibly fun to me, but in terms of gameplay, when it comes to world design, I believe I like Wilds the most. The movement is fun as you get to run around on the secrets, and they handle very well, and moving around the map is very fun, and having the ability to move between each area without having to fast travel is very cool, even if I don't use it. But where I do like the gameplay from Wilds, I don't care for the world design as much, like Windward Plains for example. I have never cared for desert biomes in any game ever really, and while I will admit as far as desert biomes go, Wilds is really cool, I just don't like it in general. The other areas are a little more noteworthy, like Ishard Cliffs or Iveria. I don't think they are as good to me as locations from World, but I do still like them. And my least favorite, unfortunately, in this section is Rise. I do want to say first that Rise is my least played game, so there is a very good chance that I just have yet to see everything that game has to offer in terms of its locations and biomes. I like Rise, but I like its visuals the least. I think the sense of grandeur that World and Wilds have for their worlds and areas just do such a good job at making you feel like you're in huge environments that sprawl into ecosystems that would take years to understand. The areas and biomes of Rise simply feel smaller. I will admit I enjoy how you move through them as the Palamutes. The dogs were a very cool addition. Having a second companion that you can fully customize, and the fact that they have a drift mechanic when you're riding them is cool and also kind of funny. I find these ecosystems and biomes not as interesting as what World and Wilds have in them, but I think that's kind of the point. Rise is smaller than the other two. In Rise, you fight to protect just a small village where there are very few hunters, and that's why it's such a big deal when you become a hunter at the beginning of the story. The village is so small that everyone in it is like one big family. And this isn't a bad thing. If anything, it makes Rise feel cozy to me sometimes. The storytelling of Rise is of nothing of note to me, and the same goes for World, as what stands out about those games is the feeling that they provide through their stories. Not so much as the storytelling itself, but what you get from it in terms of feeling. With Rise, it's a sense of coziness as the worlds feel smaller and more content, whereas with World, it is a sense of grandeur, feeling like you're going on an adventure, discovering a new world. While I don't think the stories are well written, I do like some of the characters in both of these stories. The Admiral just being like a guy that just goes through the wilderness and punching monsters so hard they explode, the serious handler being surprisingly endearing, and the same for the twins and most other people that help you in Rise. They all make it a far more fun experience, and our dumb, stupid, unfathomably dumb, reckless handler who almost gets us killed like 3 different times. I don't like the handler that much. The storytelling of World is at its strongest when things are happening. When the world is shifting around you and you get to enjoy the positive qualities of the supporting cast reacting to what big things are happening. And the same goes for Rise, but to a lesser extent in my opinion. However, this is not the case for Wilds. Wilds has the most prevalent storytelling between the 3, and I love that. I know some people complained about the story, and in some ways I get why. Going from a non-important form of storytelling, where most players just get to ignore what's said and learn more about the world through videos or their own exploration of the gameplay itself, to a far more in-your-face type of storytelling, is bound to make many people mad. Like the forced walking sections and things of that nature, I get why the average Monster Hunter player would absolutely despise that, and I will admit, the writing in Wilds can be a bit cheesy and goofy at times, but overall I liked the story. I liked the way it was told, and if they keep telling their stories like this, I genuinely would like to see in what ways they improve their storytelling. I like the focus on the characters. Our team is fun. Gemma being Little Miss Forge is really neat. I like Alma because unlike some handlers, she has actual common sense and is also endearing in my opinion. And I like how our character is treated in the story as well. Having a voiced character was a very good idea for making our character feel like an actual person, as opposed to just a silent force of nature. Nothing against how our character is treated in previous games, but I really like what they did with our character in Wilds, and I think the way that they added it makes me feel like our character is more of a character since we actually interact with other people. And the by my own order thing is like the coolest thing in every Monster Hunter game ever, and I will die on this hill, that was so cool, I enjoyed that. I will admit, I believe that the story does lack a sense of adventure that World had, and it doesn't feel as cozy, for lack of a better word, for Rise. I think it does have a somewhat decent sense of mystery with the Guardians in Wyveria that's portrayed through Nata and finding out what happened to his people, as having a story with more of an emphasis on its storytelling makes it so that the details matter more, and because of this, it's easier to notice them in more quiet moments of character dialogue, and mystery is able to be built more so through this. But with that, there is one last topic to speak about, and it's one of the more important topics to discuss, as I mean, monster's half of the name of the game, so... Monsters and the difficulty of fighting them in each game. This topic is going to be kind of hard to cover as there are so many monsters in just one game. Taking the time to talk about them in a more specific category would take too long, but there are also so many that talking about them in a blanket term is bound to apply the wrong idea to the wrong monster. So I think I will just try to talk about them in my own personal experiences with each game. As for me, I don't really have a favorite game regarding the monsters. All of the games have monsters I like and some I don't. For example, I like Ligiana in World, I like Raidao in Wilds, and I like Kadaki in Rise. But as for the monsters I don't like fighting, there is Black Veil Hazak in World and his stupid status effects, and Brachydios in Wilds, to a lesser extent now as I've gotten a little bit more used to fighting him, but I still find him somewhat annoying. And then for Rise, there's Mudface, but I don't remember his name. I'm gonna put a picture of his face now. And I do think again that it is unfair to compare the DLC for World and Rise to Wilds, as the DLC for Wilds will likely add a slew of monsters to it that the other two may not have, but I do think that the introduction of Guardians in Wilds was really cool. I like that they're making an effort to not have as many Elder Dragons as there were compared to World. In my opinion, I think having as many Elder Dragons as we did in World kind of diminished the concept of the Elder Dragon's rarity and importance. I know the entire point of the New World was that it was a place that attracted Elder Dragons, so that's why there were so many there. But the problem for me is that the entire point of Elden Dragons is that they are a rare force of nature that very few truly understand, making it feel like they are magical creatures when they are just in reality monsters that have functionalities that we understand so little it feels akin to magic. But when World had their Rose Gallery of Elder Dragons, especially in Iceborne, they just started to feel like strong monsters. Not Elder Dragons, save a few like Elatrion. I like the monsters in World, I just think they went a little too crazy with the Elder Dragons. And I think that's what I like about Wild so far. There has been only one Elder Dragon. Sure, Zoshia is akin to an Elder Dragon, but so far only Gog has been the only real Elder Dragon, and fighting him really feels like it. But as far as Rise goes, I don't have any overwhelming feelings about the monsters, and to be fair, I have not gotten very far in Sunbreak, so I don't think I have experienced enough of the game to really create my opinion on this, even for the base game. I like some of the monsters, I don't like others, that's really it for me. But to wrap things up, I guess I'll talk about how each game felt in its difficulty. For Worlds, it's pretty obvious. Base World had a decent amount of difficulty, but nothing major, with the exception of Nergigante. The first few times I fought him, I really struggled. But then there was Iceborne being the pain machine, as it really raised the difficulty. Then I think Rise starts at a somewhat mid-level difficulty, and has been getting a little bit harder as I've been starting to go through the DLC, but nothing major yet. But with Wilds, this was probably the easiest playthrough I think I've ever had for a Monster Hunter base game experience. Not to the point that it was too easy, but enough that throughout my entire playthrough of the base game, I only got carded 2 or 3 times, and it was mostly due to my stupidity of trying to figure out how to do the counter rush against New Udra's flamethrower. Now let me say, I am not a good Monster Hunter player. On a good day, I am mediocre at best, so I don't think the lack of difficulty was from skill. Maybe playing Iceborne made me get used to getting slapped around to the point that even if the game isn't easy, if I'm not getting bodied, I just think it's easy. Maybe it's wild sandboxes with things like Focus Strike, making it so that you can deal an easy burst of damage without any major repercussions. I don't know. It could be anything, but regardless, Wilds felt the easiest to me. However, in recent updates, they have made an effort to make the game significantly harder. Again, with Gog, he can easily triple cart you if you're not even remotely ready. So while it is the easiest to me, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it was ever a problem for me as I went through the story or anything after. And it's not brain dead easy. The game still has difficulty. It just felt the easiest compared to the other two. But this brings me to my final point, that despite being the same franchise, they are pretty different games that do their own things. And because of that, when I compare these games to one another, I don't really say that one is worse than the other. I just want to say that they do things better than one another. Each game is its own unique experience, and the same could probably be said for any monster game in the entire franchise. Not to mention, there are so many other things I didn't even talk about. The sandbox balancing, multiplayer, the music, there are a lot of things that make each Monster Hunter game its own unique experience. But as for me, I just like all 3. So with that, thank you for getting all the way through this video. I hope that you enjoyed it despite it not being a very good video, and I hope that you have a good day or a good night, and I hope that everything in your life goes right. Thank you for watching.